Her father sold her for a bottle of whiskey. The cowboy said, "I'd pay double to save her life." Red Rock, Arizona Territory. Late summer, 1874. The wind hung thick with dust and regret as the last of the day's light bled across the sky. Red Rock was a forgotten place where blood dried fast and debts lingered long. Inside the crooked spine of the town, the saloon named the Rusted Spur came alive under oil lamps and whiskey breath. Cards slapped against wood, boots scraped, laughter cut like razors. And through the bat-winged doors stumbled Gideon Quinn, once a handsome man, now a husk reeking of gin and desperation. In one trembling hand, he gripped a dark glass bottle. In the other, the wrist of a girl, barely a woman. Her name was Eleanor Quinn. Most called her Ellie. 19 years of small silences and long suffering gave her the bearing of someone twice her age. Her hair, a tousled shade of honey, fell around her shoulders in a braid hastily undone. Her face was half hidden behind a hand-sewn kerchief, but the eyes, those haunted ocean eyes, were unmistakable. Behind the bar, Macklin Hodge leaned back in his chair. A scar crossed the bridge of his nose, his fingers glittering with rings paid for in bone. He did not stand as Gideon approached. He didn't have to. "Well?" Macklin asked, voice slick as grease. "Where's my payment, Quinn?" Gideon held up the bottle, label faded but unmistakable. Irish whiskey, unopened, rare. He slammed it on the table. "There," he slurred. "Top shelf, worth a man's life." Macklin gave a slow, taunting chuckle. "A man's? Maybe, but your debts say otherwise." Gideon's gaze shifted, desperate. "Then take something better. My daughter." The saloon stilled. Ellie gasped as her arm was yanked forward. "Pa, what are you?" "One bottle for the girl. Let me walk free," Gideon said louder, braver than he felt. "She's worth more than me." A few laughs broke out. A whistle. The clink of a chair scraping back. But not everyone found it amusing. From the back corner, a man stood. Cassian Rowe had been sitting there the whole time, silent, watching. Now he moved, with the slow precision of someone who had seen too many things and lived through worse. His boots thudded against the floor as he approached the table. The laughter faded. Cassian's hat shadowed his face, but when he spoke, his voice cut clean. "I'll pay double, but she leaves here free." Gideon blinked. Macklin's mouth twitched. The silence was thick. 2 gold coins hit the table with a dull chime. No one moved. Cassian stepped closer, his height imposing, but his tone low. "I'm not here to gamble, Macklin, just to stop this farce." Ellie stared at him, unsure whether to run or faint. Cassian didn't look at her like the others had. Not like meat, not like property, just a person. He took off his long brown duster and gently placed it around her shoulders. Her arms trembled as she clutched the fabric. She looked up. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Cassian didn't flinch. "For now," he said, "just to get you out of here." And with that, the room dared not argue. Not with the look in his eyes. Not with the pistol hanging on his hip that had seen war. He reached for her hand, not as possession, but invitation. And Ellie Quinn, for the first time in her life, stepped forward without asking permission. The streets of Red Rock were restless under the moonlight, dust swirling like whispers of unfinished sins. Cassian's boots hit the wooden boards of the saloon porch hard, dragging behind him a girl with a torn shawl and eyes like a frightened deer. "Let her go." Macklin's men drew their guns. Cassian's reply was a single shot, clean, quick, and deliberate, splintering the floor just inches from the feet of the nearest thug. "The next one does not miss," he said coldly, sweeping Ellie onto the saddle of a chestnut mare tied outside. "Hold tight," he told her. Ellie resisted, panic rising in her throat. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" Cassian did not answer. He mounted behind her and kicked the horse into a gallop. The town shrank behind them, swallowed by darkness and dust. They rode for what felt like hours. the wind whipping Ellie's hair into her face, tears of fear and confusion stinging her eyes. She had no idea who the man was, only that he was not her father and had just stolen her from one kind of prison into another. When they finally stopped near a shallow creek under a canopy of pines, Cassian slid off first and reached up to help her down. She jerked away from his hand. "You're just another man thinking he owns me," she spat. "You're no different than my father." Cassian turned slowly, his voice quiet but sharp as flint. "I do not buy people," he said. "I break chains." She froze. He walked toward the horse, loosening the saddle, letting it breathe. He said nothing more, but Ellie's heart thudded painfully. She stood frozen in place, unsure whether to run or scream. He lit a fire, keeping a respectful distance. She noticed he placed his rifle close by, but not aimed. He pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from his saddlebag and unwrapped half a cornbread loaf, handing a chunk toward her. Ellie did not take it. Cassian shrugged and set it beside a rock between them, turning his attention to his horse. She watched as he checked the animal's hooves, then knelt and rubbed a balm into a small scrape on its leg, murmuring to it softly. It was a tenderness she had never seen in a man before. Finally, Ellie sat. The silence stretched, filled only by crackling fire and night insects. She watched him, studying the way he moved with certainty, with care, but still, she could not trust him, not yet. "I know you want to run," he said suddenly, not looking at her. "And you can. I won't stop you." Ellie stiffened. "But if you do," he continued, "you should know there are 3 men riding hard behind us. They are not here to save you. They are here to claim what they think was promised." She said nothing, but her fingers curled tightly into her skirt. Cassian leaned back against a tree, sighing. "You get to decide who you trust, but I do not make deals with devils. I only take them down." As she turned her head away, he stood, walked to her side, and placed something in the dirt. A small hunting knife. "In case you think I am dangerous," he said, voice low. "You get to sleep with this tonight." She blinked up at him. He walked back to his spot by the tree, rolled out a blanket, and lay down with his back turned. Ellie picked up the knife, weighed it in her hand, cold steel but oddly comforting. That night, she did not sleep, but she also did not run. Instead, she sat, holding the knife close, her eyes fixed on the silhouette of the man by the fire, a man who had not touched her, had not asked for anything, a man who did not look at her like a prize, but like someone broken he refused to abandon. For the first time since her mother died, she felt something stir in her chest. Not safety, but maybe the memory of what safety once was. The fire crackled softly under a sky of ink and stars. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled into the emptiness. But here at the edge of a narrow creek near the Colorado border, it was almost peaceful. Ellie Quinn sat cross-legged near the flames, her dress streaked with dust and a faint cut on her cheek from earlier. Her eyes were trained on the man across from her, Cassian Rowe. He sat silently, shirt pulled halfway down as he wrapped a blood-stained bandage around his bicep. The cut was from a fall earlier that day, when his horse spooked crossing a ravine. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Ellie asked softly, nodding to his hand-stitched bandage. Cassian looked up, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "Army," he said simply. "Was a field medic out west, near Fort Bridger." She watched him for a moment longer. "Why'd you leave?" Cassian stared into the flames. "Because I wasn't fast enough," he said, "to save someone who mattered." Ellie didn't ask more, but something shifted in the air between them. After a long silence, Cassian spoke again, quieter this time. "Her name was Isobel, my sister, 16. We were headed to Kansas after our parents died. On the trail, she got taken. Some trader thought she'd fetch a price. By the time I tracked her down, it was too late." His jaw clenched. "I didn't get there in time. I swore I'd never be too late again." Ellie's heart pulled tight in her chest. She understood now. This wasn't pity. Cassian didn't see her as something broken to be fixed. He saw chains, and he broke them. The next morning, she woke to the scent of hot beans and fresh coffee. Cassian had the tin cup ready, smoke rising from the pan. She didn't say much, just nodded her thanks and ate quietly. That day, they traveled farther into the mountains, silent most of the way. But something unspoken pulsed between them, something softer than suspicion and stronger than fear. That night, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Ellie saw Cassian limping slightly while tending to his horse. Without a word, she walked over and handed him the last clean strip of cloth from her satchel. "You missed a spot," she murmured. He raised a brow but accepted it. "Thanks." Later, while he knelt fixing the saddle strap, she sat cross-legged nearby, mending a tear in his coat. He glanced over, surprised. "Didn't ask you to fix it," he said. "You didn't need to," Ellie replied, not looking up. "You don't ask for much." When the wind grew cold, Cassian laid out a blanket, but made no move to share it. Instead, he took the colder ground near the fire, always facing outward, his rifle close by. He didn't sleep much, Ellie noticed that, and she didn't feel afraid anymore. That night, before they turned in, Cassian placed a small knife in its sheath next to her. "In case," he said simply. Ellie looked at it, then at him. "You still think I might be dangerous?" she asked. "I think you should have the choice," Cassian answered. "Not many people ever gave you one." She held the knife but didn't move it, didn't run. She lay back, the stars overhead watching like old gods, and as her eyes closed, for the first time in years, her breathing came easy. Ellie wasn't a prize. She wasn't a debt. She was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was something else. Something whole. Someone free. The trail narrowed into a rocky canyon, walls rising like silent witnesses to their flight. Cassian and Ellie moved side by side, mounts trudging up a dusty incline, sunlight slipping away behind jagged peaks. The air grew cooler. The scent of pine mingled with the tension of being hunted. Ellie noticed Cassian's jaw set firm. "What is it?" she asked quietly as she jockeyed her horse. "Quiet," he said. "We're being followed." Moments later, they heard the whistle of bullets tapping against rock. Royce Denton emerged from the canyon's shadow, rifle in hand, his two companions stepping into the light. Royce's lips curled. "Thought you could outrun a contract, Ro?" he called. Cassian slid off his horse with a smooth motion, positioning himself between Ellie and the attackers. "Back beyond that rock, now," he instructed her. Then he drew his revolver and fired at a cluster of stones near Royce's feet, sending shale and grit flying. Ellie splashed toward cover behind a large boulder, heart pounding. For a moment, she believed she was simply fleeing again. But Cassian's calm presence steadied her. A gunshot cracked, and Cassian staggered, a red bloom spreading across his shoulder. He fell to a kneel. Ellie wanted to cry out, to run, but she held still. Royce advanced, sneering. "Look at you, girl. Whose toy is this now?" Ellie's vision narrowed. Suddenly the world stopped slicing into fear and became a clear line of action: fight or be taken. She grabbed a heavy branch, raised it high, and with all her strength brought it down on Royce's temple. The crack echoed, and he crumpled to the ground. Cassian gasped. Pain and relief tangled in his features. "You're not her, but you fight like she would've," he rasped, blood wet on his shirt. Ellie's breath caught. She knelt beside him. Her hands trembled as she tore strips from her skirt to bind his wound. The moon rose, silver light bathing the canyon floor. She saw Cassian's raw vulnerability, and something in her shifted. She fetched water from the creek, boiled it in a mess tin, and gently cleaned the cut. Cassian winced, but made no complaint. She used a thin twig as a splint. He watched her, pride mingling with pain in his eyes. Neither spoke for a while, only the crackle of fire and the distant crying coyotes. Finally, Cassian placed his hand over hers on the bandage. "We're going to get through this," he said softly. Ellie nodded, her throat tight. "Because you saved me," she whispered. No, he replied, because you saved yourself. When dawn crept white across the ridge, Cassian woke to find her asleep curled beside him, hand still laid across his wound. Hesitant, he reached out and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Gentle, careful. For the first time, he treated her not like a prize or a burden, but as someone equal. He moved back and allowed her to sleep, the canyon quiet and patient around them. Ellie dreamed, for the first time in a long while, of something more than escape. The town had no name, not on any map Cassian knew, just a handful of sun-bleached buildings, a trading post, and the smell of dust that clung to everything like a second skin. We stay here a few days, Cassian said, pulling the reins tight as the horse neighed and stopped in front of the general store. Ellie slid off without a word. Her eyes scanned the sleepy town with the cautious gaze of someone who had only ever known danger in new places. They took a small room behind the shop, wooden walls thin enough to hear every bootstep outside. Cassian paid a week in advance, his fingers brushing the gold coins hidden inside the heel of his saddle. By the third day, Ellie had changed. Her hair was braided neatly down her back. Her dress, new, soft blue, and modest, fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. She sat on the porch in the early hours, reading an old book Cassian had found in a bin behind the store. "Didn't peg you for a reader," he said casually one morning. "I didn't know I was either," she replied, barely looking up. That same morning Cassian said, "Come on, let's walk the market." Ellie hesitated, then nodded. The square was lively. Vendors called out prices. Children darted between stalls, the air thick with sun, and the scent of leather and dried herbs. While Cassian looked over new reins, Ellie wandered to a small table filled with tarnished silver trinkets. She stopped. A single hairpin, silver, opal inlay, shaped like a snowflake, caught her eye. She reached for it, fingers trembling slightly, then let her hand drop. "You like it?" the vendor asked. Ellie offered a polite smile. "It's pretty, that's all." She turned away before he could reply. Cassian had seen everything. On the way back, weaving through the crowd, he said suddenly, "Hold still." "What?" From his coat pocket, he pulled the pin. He stepped close, brushed a few strands of her hair aside, and slid it into place behind her ear. "If something catches your eye," he said, "you deserve to wear it." Ellie froze. Her eyes widened, lips parting, but no words came. The sunlight caught the tiny gem in the pin. She blinked fast, and for a moment he wasn't sure if she'd speak or cry. Back at the inn, the landlady, a gray-haired widow with eyes sharper than her age, suggested, "Watch them enter." "Wife?" she asked Cassian with a smirk. He hesitated just for a breath. "Something like that." Ellie blushed but said nothing. Later that afternoon, Cassian went to check on the horses. He noticed 3 strangers talking to the stable boy. One of them, a tall man with a black vest and a sidearm, pulled a folded paper from his coat. "We're looking for a girl," he said. "Ellie Quinn." Cassian's posture stiffened. "Never heard of her," he said coolly. "You sure?" Cassian gave a slight smile. "Positive." He returned to find Ellie near the well behind the store. "We need to leave, now." "What happened?" "They're here. They're looking for you." He led her through a back alley, his hand warm on the small of her back. When they emerged onto the main road, they walked close, slow, like lovers returning from an afternoon stroll. A man stepped in their path. "You two from around here?" Cassian wrapped his arm around Ellie's shoulder. "My wife and I are traveling north. Whoever you're looking for, she's not her." That night, the room was quiet. Ellie sat at the edge of the bed, her back to him. She reached up and removed the pin from her hair. "Did you lie?" she asked, voice low. "For me or for yourself?" Cassian looked at her for a long time, then answered quietly, "Sometimes I forget the difference." They didn't speak after that, but the silence wasn't cold. It pulsed, slow, warm, full of something neither of them dared to name. The afternoon sun cast long golden shadows on the dusty porch of the little inn. Cassian sat outside, quietly polishing the worn leather of his saddle, lost in the calming rhythm of the cloth across the smooth surface. The clatter of wheels broke the peace. A dust-covered stagecoach rolled to a stop, creaking ominously. Cassian's eyes narrowed. The door opened with a groan, and out stepped a man in a freshly pressed coat. Boots shined unnaturally bright. His silver-streaked beard was trimmed, his eyes calculating. "Gideon Quinn," Cassian muttered under his breath. Behind him, two men flanked Gideon, one holding a satchel, the other wearing a sheriff's badge from a neighboring town, though it looked like it had not been polished in months. Cassian stood as they approached the front steps of the inn. Gideon's lips curled in a smug half-smile. "I'm here for what's mine," he declared, "and the law agrees." He waved a folded parchment toward Cassian. The front door creaked open. Ellie appeared on the threshold, freezing as her eyes locked with her father's. Her face paled, but she did not move. "I came to take back what's mine," Gideon repeated, louder. "And the bounty says she's worth plenty alive." Cassian blocked the entrance with one step. "She's not going anywhere." The so-called sheriff pulled the paper from Gideon's hand and offered it to Cassian. Signed guardianship rights. "She's not of legal age. Her father still has claim." Cassian unfolded it, his eyes flickering across the fine print, the seal at the bottom. He blinked once, then again, his fingers tracing the stamp. "This seal's wrong," he said coldly. "It belongs to a courthouse in Greystone. That town was burned down 5 years ago, and the judge, whose name is here, he's been dead for 3. The crowd that had begun to gather murmured. The lawman took a step back, face pale. Cassian held the paper up and called out, "This document is forged." The second man with Gideon muttered a curse, turned on his heel, and disappeared into the street. The sheriff followed quickly behind. "Damn you," Gideon hissed, turning to Ellie. "You think you're better than me now, wearing fancy dresses and letting some stranger fight your battles." Ellie stepped down onto the street. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. "You traded me once, for a bottle. I belong to no one now, not even you." She grabbed the paper from Cassian's hand and tore it in two, then again and again, until nothing remained but shreds fluttering in the dry breeze. She tossed the pieces into the wind. A cheer broke out from the bystanders. "We saw the trade, Quinn," the old woman who owned the general store shouted. "She ain't yours no more." Gideon lunged forward in rage, but before he could reach Ellie, the sharp crack of Cassian's pistol butt hitting the wooden railing echoed across the street. He had drawn the gun faster than most could blink, holding it low but firm. "Touch her," he said evenly, "and you'll know what regret tastes like." Gideon froze. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. The town deputy, finally stepping up with 2 others, moved in and clamped shackles on Gideon's wrists. "We got enough complaints and witnesses to hold you on charges of trafficking and fraud," he grunted. The coach was turned around, Gideon shoved inside, shouting curses until the door slammed shut. Ellie didn't cry. She didn't speak. She stood tall, eyes locked on the horizon as the coach disappeared in a trail of dust. Cassian came to stand beside her, silent and steady. That night, they sat on the porch under the stars, each with a steaming mug of tea. "I've seen a lot of men try to own women," Cassian said, voice low, "but I've never seen one earn her the way you just did." Ellie stared into her cup, then looked up at him. "I don't want to be owned," she whispered. "I just want to be free enough to choose who I walk beside." Cassian gave a single nod, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips, and for the first time it reached his eyes. The town was quiet again. The dust from Gideon's departure had barely settled, clinging to the wooden steps and empty windows like old shame, but Cassian was already tightening the saddle straps. His hands moved with the silent precision of someone who had packed up too many times, always ready to leave before anything had a chance to root. His jaw was set, unreadable, the kind of stillness that spoke louder than any goodbye. He didn't say a word to Ellie, didn't knock on her door, just left a folded note beneath a tin cup on the windowsill where the sun might find it before she did. I'll ride east at sunrise. The road is yours now, whichever way you take it. When dawn came, the light stretched long and thin across the empty road. The sky burned with soft iron clouds and streaks of peach, the kind of morning that whispered of both storms and salvation. Cassian mounted alone, no sounds behind him but the slow breath of his horse and the whisper of leather settling into place. He gave the inn one last glance. The door remained closed. And so he rode, mile after mile, with nothing but the rise and fall of the hills and the memory of her voice sitting behind his ribs. He didn't know how long he'd keep riding, maybe until the dust behind him turned to wind and the road ahead stopped feeling like escape. But then, behind him, hooves. He turned, and there she was. Ellie rode like she'd been born in the saddle, the wind tearing at her loose braid, her dress clinging to the shape of motion. No hat, no luggage, just her and the look in her eyes, sharp as flint. Cassian pulled back slightly, arching a brow. "You lost?" Ellie slowed beside him, her voice steady despite the flush in her cheeks. "No. I don't follow men," she said, chin tilted. "I follow my own damn compass, today. It just points to you." Cassian didn't smile, not right away. He leaned over, adjusted the strap on her saddle, something that didn't need adjusting. His fingers brushed hers, deliberate. "Then let's ride." They traveled with no destination but forward, through mesas scorched gold and red, pine forests where elk watched from shadows, and towns that didn't know or care about their pasts. They traded labor for food, hunting rabbits, fixing saddles, and once, helping a widow rebuild her chicken coop after a storm. Ellie began to laugh, real, unguarded laughter. She told stories by firelight, took down a rattlesnake with one shot, and stitched a small pouch to carry herbs she collected. She was learning how to live, not just survive. They didn't talk about Gideon, or the saloon, or the girl she used to be. There was no need. One night, under a sky scattered with stars, Cassian handed her a cloth from his saddlebag. Ellie opened it, a handkerchief, soft and clean, with a tiny wildflower stitched into the corner. "You stitched me up when I was bleeding," he said quietly. "Figured I'd do the same." Ellie held it gently, brushing her thumb over the stitches. "We're both stitched back now," she said. "Not perfect, but whole." Cassian nodded, watching the fire. "That's the only kind of whole that matters. No kiss, no declarations. Just the slow warmth of firelight, the rhythm of two hearts healing side by side, and a silence that didn't need filling." They returned to Red Rock in the late spring. This time, there was no fear clinging to their shadows, no urgency in their footsteps. Cassian came to send one last letter, a farewell to a sister who would never read it, but who deserved to be remembered in the place he'd last heard her name. Ellie rode beside him, her back straight, chin lifted. The townsfolk turned to look, not with pity, but with quiet admiration. The girl they once saw as a gambler's pawn now returned as her own woman. They stayed, not because they had nowhere else to go, but because something about the red dust and the crooked smiles of Red Rock felt strangely like roots. Cassian bought a small plot of land north of town. It had a stream, a patch of thistle-covered valley, and enough space for quiet to settle. He built a modest house with his own hands, learning as he went, cursing just enough to make Ellie laugh. Ellie opened a bookshop in town, just 2 shelves at first, a reading corner for children. She called it the Hollow Shelf. No child paid to read. No adult was turned away for not knowing how. Cassian trained wild horses and repaired saddles. People came from neighboring towns to buy his hand-stitched leather. They said the horses he gentled listened better than most men. One night, under the porch light, Cassian placed a pair of new riding gloves in front of Ellie. Tucked inside the left glove was a small ring, hand-carved from walnut wood. Smooth, simple, with a tiny etching of a wildflower at the base. "I never thought I'd be the one to ask," he said, voice rougher than usual. "You were never mine to keep, but if one day you feel like choosing this road again, I'll be here." Ellie held the ring in her palm like it was made of glass. Her eyes glistened. She didn't hesitate. "I've been choosing you every damn day since I left that town." They didn't plan a wedding. No preacher, no white dress, just hands held across a table, vows exchanged in silence, eyes speaking more than words. The townsfolk began to call their land Quinn's Hollow, not for Gideon, but for Ellie, the girl who chose light after living too long in shadow. They hung a new sign on the front gate, carved in oak and nailed above the fence: Cassian and Eleanor Rowe, saddles, stories, and second chances. It wasn't fancy, but it said everything they were. One soft spring afternoon, Ellie sat on the porch with a book in hand, a breeze teasing loose strands from her braid. Cassian was by the barn, repairing a leather strap, fingers moving with the calm surety of a man who knew peace when he had it. A little girl wandered up the path, dusty shoes and wild curls. She stopped in front of the porch and asked, "Is this where you live?" Ellie looked up from her book and smiled, sunlight catching in her eyes. She set the book down and knelt to the girl's level. "No, darling," she said gently. "This is where I started to live." And behind her, the wind rustled the leaves, carrying with it the scent of honeysuckle and horsehide, laughter and healing, and the quiet, steady hum of a life that was finally, truly theirs. "Thank you for riding all the way to the end of—" Her father sold her for a bottle of whiskey, the cowboy. Said, "I'd pay double to save her life." If Ellie and Cassian's journey stirred something in you, if their grit, their quiet tenderness, and that long road toward healing felt like more than just a story, then hit that hype button like you mean it. There's more where that came from. For lovers of dusty trails, slow-burn romances, and wild-hearted souls who fight for freedom and each other, don't just ride off yet. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories and saddle up for the next unforgettable ride. Your next favorite couple could be just one story away.